All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. I don't want to penalize anybody for being on time. So, welcome to the launch event of the Worldwide Teach-In on Climate and Justice. We are delighted to be part of Climate Week NYC, and we are delighted to have you each and all with us today. I'm David Blockstein with Bard College, our graduate programs in sustainability, and I am the co-director of the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week. I will be serving as the MC for today. So our plan is we're going to show you our new introductory video in just a moment. And then we're going to have Eban Goodstein, my partner and colleague on the project, will introduce the project. And then we will have our partners on the project, Dan Castrogano from Subject to Climate, Elissa Teles Munoz from National Wildlife Federation, and Bryce Coon from the Earth Day organization. And each will speak, we'll show you another video, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. So again, we're delighted to have you with us, and let's start with the introductory video, please.
While Tobias is getting that loaded up, I want to just thank everybody for being here today. We'll be talking about the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week. That's obviously the agenda today. To frame this up a little bit, we're coming off the hottest summer of all times in human history. There are many, many educators around the world who I think are looking to figure out how to engage. And what we're trying to do is create a platform where we are all much stronger together. So let's, Tobias, you want to try that one more time?
You can see this?
Yep, looks good. Go from the beginning though.
Yep.
Yep.
Where are you emotionally on climate change? 1 is I never think about. 10 is paralyzing anxiety. Can't sleep at night. Don't want to have kids because their world will be to this topic.
The Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week is about helping people move from climate despair and disengagement to a mindset of climate repair. This is the education that changes the future. So Climate Week is for everyone. It's for students, faculty, and staff from all subjects, like artists and psychologists, scientists and business majors, students of music, literature, economics, international affairs, healthcare and engineering, you name it.
Join tens of thousands of people around the world in growing climate education. The first week of April, 2024. You're not alone. People on your campus are really worried about climate change. If you step up, others will join you. At your school, you can make climate an event. This means solutions and justice events on your campus. Art, theater, panel discussions, films, faith meetings, music, games, fairs, and displays. Check out our website for examples from all over the world. Engage your whole school.
On top of your events, you can also help to make climate a class. This means encouraging climate-concerned teachers from all subjects, art, history, chemistry, psychology, all subjects, to spend at least half an hour talking about how climate change solutions and justice are relevant to their field of study, how artists, historians, chemists, and mathematicians are all thinking about climate change. We have step-by-step guides on our website to help you make this happen.
Last summer was the hottest in history. Massive fires, heat waves, floods everywhere. We have to stop it from getting hotter every year. You can help organize Climate and Justice Education Week at your school. The biggest threat to our future? Thinking that someone else will lead. that someone else will stop the climate crisis. Now, not next month, not next year. We all need to step up. Join us.
So that is our brand new launch video. Yeah, thank you. And we thank our partners who participated in that, and Amy Kalafa, the filmmaker who put this all together. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Eban Goodstein, my partner and friend and colleague on the project. Eban is the Vice President for Environment at Bard College, and he's Director of the Graduate Program of Graduate Programs in Sustainability and the founder and co-director of Worldwide Climate and Education Week.
Thanks, David and Tobias, and thank you all for being here today. April seems like it's centuries away, but we need to get started early, thinking about the kind of work we can do together, because there is increasingly not a lot of time, right? And so we, you're all here today because you are deeply climate concerned. And as the video stated, more and more of your colleagues are as well. I mean, I think we're at a point where, 50, 70, 90% of the faculty and students on many campuses are pretty high up on that climate anxiety scale. How do we take what is increasingly, a sense of despair and disengagement, and really think about how we can turn that into a focus on, I'm not sure what's up with my slideshow, it's kind of going crazy here. Let me get back to the beginning. To a focus on just the reality of the coming decades, right? This is not an issue that's going to be fixed overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so a world in which we're kind of paralyzed by climate anxiety isn't helpful. And so we're kind of advocating helping students adopt a mindset of climate repair, right? We've done a lot of damage to the climate. There's a lot of repair work that needs to be done. And we want to really help young people understand that, if they want to be artists, then there's a role for climate art. And if they want to be scientists, there's a role for climate science. And if they want to be engineers, they can be climate engineers or climate lawyers or climate, geologists or climate sociologists. And so how can they marry their interests in work and avocations with the idea of climate solutions? So it doesn't just seem like, all they can do is, eat less meat, which they should do, but that there's bigger ways that they can all engage and more substantive ways that they can all engage through the pursuit of their own passions. So the theme this year is turning from climate despair to climate repair. Recognizing that we're living at a time where, every action we take is either going to be a repair action or a disrepair action. And how do we adjust our lives to work in that space? And as Carrie Ann said, the biggest threat to the future, right, is thinking that someone else is going to lead. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today, recognizing that you have a commitment to get involved with this project and get others involved with this project, because this is all part of a movement, right? This is part of a process of mobilizing millions of people around the world to take on this climate repair mantle. And the global climate movement really suffered in the pandemic. If you think about this, 4 years ago, you had the Fridays for the Future movement, and Sunrise in the United States, and Greta Thunberg was in the news all the time. All that stuff really got shut down. And so the climate movement is reinvigorating now. I was just in New York City with 75,000 people on the streets 2 days ago. It's coming back. And this is a platform, right, to build that. So what we need you all to do is not only, commit to organizing on your own campuses in your own communities, but also reaching out to those other climate concerned people that at your university, but also at other universities and high schools, and telling them about this opportunity, right? Because this is really just about old-fashioned community organizing. If we're not actually talking to people, if we're just sending emails, nothing happens, right? You got to actually sit down with people, have a meeting, have a coffee, have a phone call, and get them focused on the need to be part of something big, and that's what we're about. Again, the theory of change here is there are tens of thousands of climate concerned educators around the world, and that includes students, faculty, and staff, people who care and want to engage others. And the idea is to mobilize those tens of thousands of people to then engage hundreds of thousands of students with the idea about working on climate in their lives ahead, and whatever professional sort of work they're going to engage in, but also as consumers and investors and citizens and activists and protesters and voters. There are many, many ways that people can engage. So over the last couple of years, we've been active in this, and we have engaged thousands of educators. We've not engaged tens of thousands, Yvette. We've engaged thousands of educators at hundreds of schools. And the result has been significant. Last year, sorry, my slideshow is really jumping around. There we go. Last year, we had 350 events at 60 countries with 50,000 participants. And again, that was driven by probably 2,000 core organizers, volunteers like yourselves. It was called the Teach-In last year. It was a one-day event. But this year, we're moving towards the vision of a week-long series of events on your campus to really elevate this project. And what we really need literally is tens of thousands of organizers at thousands of colleges and universities, engaging hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million students this year. So that's our ambition, because we need to be there. And as the film mentioned, there's sort of two ways we're talking about this. One is making climate an event. And this can be, on campus, community. It's the beginning of Earth Month. And lots of things to do there, and we'll talk more about that. But the second approach is to make climate a class. And this is a challenge to teachers, climate concerned teachers at your university and all over the world, or your high school, to get all of those people who are growing increasingly concerned about climate change. They're not climate experts. They don't study climate change. They don't research climate change, but they're aware of how, their own discipline is engaging with climate change. Get them to spend 30 minutes in their classes, at least 30 minutes in their classes the first week of April. And these are, just normal classes: European history class, geometry class, a studio art class, a general chemistry class. Not climate focused classes, but bring climate into the classroom, again, with the idea of inspiring young people to see that chemists and artists and mathematicians are all thinking about climate change, and you can do that. You can use what you're learning in college to make a difference in the world. Every teacher, every subject, every level of formal and informal education, every school, college, university is what we need to mobilize this year. So in terms of events, on our website, we've got sort of a catalog of opportunities. And in fact, we actually have listed all of the events you can see that happened last year. So just ideas from all over the world to get you inspired. I think the main goal here is to reach beyond the usual suspects, right? Often you'll show an event, you have a movie, you'll have a speaker, and the same 30 students show up, right? So the real goal here is to be creative, sufficiently creative, in order to reach people who wouldn't otherwise be involved. We've got some plays that can be produced. We've got game shows that can be put on. We've got models for panel discussion that involve 20, 30, 40 faculty from across the campus. And that's kind of a guaranteed event that'll bring in 300 or 400 students. So lots of models on the website. And again, how do we reach beyond the usual suspects and bring more students into the conversation? So again, lots of ideas on the websites, and we'll have an opportunity over the coming weeks to talk more about these as we do our informational webinars. Make climate a class, that's the other thrust. And the basic idea here is make climate a class is really the way to reach way more students, right? If you've got 20 faculty doing make climate a class, and there's 20 students in each class, you're talking to 400 students about climate change that week. If you've got 40 students, you're talking to 800 students, 40 faculty talking to 800 students, right? So you don't have to have people come together to learn about climate change. You can actually do it in the classroom. And this is really the power of Make Climate a Class. Also, if faculty start to do this, if they do it 1 year, then it's already kind of baked into their syllabus, and they can do it again next year and the year after that and the year after that. So you're socializing climate concerned faculty to do something they're not comfortable with, right? Which is talking about climate change in a class where it doesn't really belong. But once they do it the first time, then they're going to do it again. And the very simple way is anyone can research for 15 minutes how your discipline is thinking about climate change, and then find someone who actually knows something about it, who's a historian working on this, or a sociologist, or a geologist or chemist. And we will have a list of professionals that you can tap into, figure out who your alums are that are working in this space. But bringing in someone who knows something about this, always fun, and it also gives it sort of a professional focus. So we're asking our organizers to do two things this year. One is make climate an event, but also make climate a class. Speak up in your faculty senate, send out an email, get a team of 5 folks and get them all to commit to find 5 other people. That's 25 right there. And it takes about 20 minutes to kind of get organized to do that. So it can be done. Students are very effective ambassadors. If students are asking faculty to make climate a class with email campaigns or in-person requests, that's a great way to drive engagement. Okay, so I want to ask you to do something today. Obviously, you're all signed up because you're in our email system. We'll follow up with an email with lots of things that you can do and links you can click on and pledges you can make. Our interactive map will be live soon, and we can get your map up on the webs so we can have a chance to visually see what's happening all over the world. But right now we're going to be doing these sessions twice a day on Wednesdays at 8 a.m. and at noon Eastern, starting next Wednesday, 9/27. They'll be bi-weekly. Just reach out to all the climate concerned teachers and students tell them to come to this webinar, right? Because it's this kind of actual conversation that gets people inspired and engaged to do this work. So we need people coming, learning, committing, and you can really help us because we know you all know 10 climate concerned people. We know those people, and the best way for them to get motivated and inspired is for them to come to these meetings and learn for themselves what's going on. So lots of stuff on our website, and let me just take you there real briefly so you can see it. I gotta share my screen again. And then we'll turn it over to our other presenters who are partners who are really helping us with content and great ideas. So here is the website. It's got that intro video on it, and you can see information, pledges to make climate a class, make climate an event. So, this is our central kind of location, and that's where you're going to go for information about the project and background on models and opportunities. So with that, thanks for being here, and let me turn it back over to David.
All right, thank you very much, Eban. And we'll do question and answers at the end of after each of the speakers. So as Eban talked about, every teacher, every subject, every level, every educational institution. And for teachers, who maybe need a little bit of help or want to see what kind of vetted content there is, we have a fabulous partner, a group, relatively new group called Subject to Climate. And so I'm going to turn next to Dan Castrogano, who is the Chief Content Officer of Subject to Climate. So Dan, thank you for joining us, and thank you to Subject to Climate for being our great partner.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Thanks, Eban. Glad to be here. My name is Dan Castrogano. I use he, him pronouns, calling in from unceded Abenaki territory in what's now Burlington, Vermont. And it's nice to be on a call with so many people around the States and around the world. And thank you for inviting me to share a little bit. I'm with an organization called Subject to Climate, and I have got a few slides here, but first I just wanted to tell a story, and then I'll share my screen. And before I share this story, Eban, I wanted to thank you and highlight the connection of education to the broader climate movement, seeing 75K plus in New York City marching along with actions around the world. It's really heartening to see sort of the movement actually alive and thriving. I think the biggest it's been since 2019. And even like you said, to also think about teaching as an organizer, right? To talk to people, to bring people on and to listen. I appreciate that perspective as well. So I taught for 11 years, mostly middle school and mostly social studies, but everything from K to 12 and all of the major subjects. I felt climate change and the climate crisis and a lot of climate anxiety in my body, right? Really feeling it. And as somebody teaching 6th grade ancient Civ, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, I was like, am I allowed to teach climate? Like, should I? Like, the kids should know about it. And what I did, my solution near the end of the year, this is 2 years ago now, I've been out of the classroom for 2 years working with Subject to Climate. I connected the water use, the use of the Nile River by the ancient Egyptians to the building of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which was constructed in Ethiopia on the Blue Nile. And it brings up a lot of questions and a lot of tension about drought and water security and food security and conflict in Egypt and Sudan and Ethiopia. And so splitting my students into groups to talk about the Nile River in ancient Egypt and then the Nile River now, and bringing climate change into what is essentially a pure history class. And that was my solution. And so it worked, and I know my students were grateful to learn more about climate in history class. And it took some bravery to kind of step into that space. And so I wanted to share that story. So with that, and actually, Tobias, it looks like if you could help me share a screen, that would be great. Thanks. I'll share a little bit more about my organization called Subject to Climate. Thanks, Tobias. So like I said, for 11 years, I was in the classroom, and for the last 2, Subject to Climate has been around. And our goal is to make teaching about climate change as easy as possible for all teachers K-12. So we're a nonprofit online connector. I know a lot of the folks on the call are from different universities, but we help K-12 teachers, all subjects, teach about climate. And we do that in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to walk you through 5 things that we offer. and then tell you a little bit about our work with specific states, and then I'll pass to our next presenter. So the first of our items is a resource database. So that's on the left side. So we've got over 2,300 items. The resource database has items from our content partners, including National Wildlife Federation and lots of others, as basically a library of things that are legit and credible. So every single item goes through at least 2 teachers and at least 1 climate scientist. So if it's like Sunday night and you're like, I'm on YouTube, but I have to find something and like, I don't know if it's credible, you can go to Subject to Climate because it's credible. And so we've got over 2,300 items in that database, easily searchable, filterable by grade, by subject, all grades, all subjects, K-12. On the right, we've got over 170 lesson plans developed by teachers. Again, all grades, all subjects. This one here with the screenshot is for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in English language arts class. So it's great for April because that's also poetry month. So it's writing ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry about works of art. So this one in particular is about looking at photographs about the climate crisis and then writing and sharing poetry. So it really at its core is an ELA lesson. So that's 1 and 2. Number 3 on the left side, so we have news for students. We've partnered with an organization called The Juice, and we get news items for free. They are related to climate or science or the environment in one way or another. So the screenshot shows 3 that we put on our site today. This is student facing, and there are 4 different reading levels, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11 plus, where students can read the news article, and there's 1 formative assessment. There's 1 question at the end, and everything is free. And I don't know if I mentioned that before, but our entire platform is completely free. Don't even have to log in. Everything is free. So that's on the left side. So our news for students. So pretty much every weekday we have news articles, student facing, great for like in the cracks, like some student finishes their work, finishes their assignment early. You can say, go to Subject to Climate and read some climate news. On the right side, we have a database of professional learning opportunities. So again, similar to our resource database, we bring credible things together. So we've got an item for, K2 teachers from Stanford, one of our partners, Climate Generation. So all these different events and calls, this call is in our professional learning database as well. So try to get more folks to jump on these calls. Lastly, what we call Climate Socrates. So expert help, basically our help center. So we've got explainers with our partnership with MIT, some getting started articles to help people navigate our site. And then finally, some pedagogical help articles like, should I say the phrase climate crisis? Or like, how should I teach it in art class? And just some advice from teachers. So you can browse those and kind of push you and your colleagues over the edge to be brave and to teach more climate. Finally, just wanted to highlight our work with states in the United States. So we've partnered with a lot of different organizations in New Jersey, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Maine. All 4 of those hubs are live with content specific to those states. So those are resources, lesson plans, professional development, and then all of those standards in those states. So if you're calling in from one of those states or you have friends or colleagues in any of those states, feel free to head to those state hubs. And with that, I look forward to the Q&A later. Thanks for listening. I'll pass back to you, David and Eban, for our next speaker.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. And so you can see why we're so delighted to be working with Subject to Climate. We're also delighted to be working with the National Wildlife Federation, and NWF has a project that you're going to hear about that will challenge teachers to go beyond the 30 minutes, like maybe 20 times beyond the 30 minutes. So I will turn to Elissa Teles Munoz, who is the coordinator for the Climate Resilience Education Task Force in New York City, and she's a consultant with the National Wildlife Federation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I also just wanted to uplift the work of Subject to Climate. They really are doing some fantastic work, and I'll be talking about them a little bit in my presentation. So in the same vein as how Dan started out with a story, I'd also like to start out with a story. So I graduated from university last year, and I really didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew something liberal artsy. And at 18, I signed up for a seminar class just because it had seats open, and it was an environmental ethics class. And actually, a friend of David's happened to teach this class. And this course about environmental ethics came on the heels of the 1.5 degree report in 2018. And I had never even heard of it. And we were really ushered into this new era by this wonderful professor, Paul Wapner. And it really changed the course of my career, having taken this class, because I had never learned about climate change in a meaningful way previously. And after taking that class, I was like, wow, I really do have a moral impetus to do something about it. And so here I am today as a result of taking that class. And that's just a little anecdote to demonstrate how powerful climate education can be when teachers and professors, et cetera, are supported to execute it. So with that, let me share my screen and we can talk about a National Wildlife Federation and Bard College initiative. And that's called the Teach 10 Hours for Climate campaign. So in the United States and likely in other countries all over the world, a majority of educators say that the issue of climate change is of personal importance to them. They recognize that climate change is anthropogenic. They recognize that it's a threat for current and future generations, but so few actually teach about it in the classroom. And the issue is not given the attention that it's due. So that's why Bard College and National Wildlife Federation launched the Teach 10 Hours for Climate campaign. And so the name Teach 10 Hours comes from the fact that climate change is, if at all, taught for an average of 1 to 2 hours per school year in the United States, which is absolutely unacceptable at this rate. And so, you know, we're trying to increase that fivefold so that it would be a total of 10 hours. And also comes from the fact that many teachers say that an obstacle for them is that they don't have time throughout the school year. So we're encouraging teachers to find 10 hours in their already their planned schedules to find ways that climate change can be taught creatively in the classroom. And so the For Climate, I actually am reading a book right now called Teach for Climate Justice, a Vision for Transforming Education, written by Tom Roderick. And he talks about the difference of for and about. So here's a quote from the book. He says, when climate education is offered, it's generally about climate change rather than for a habitable planet, for the transition to sustainable energy, and for climate justice. So I think this is particularly relevant for the title of this project, Teach 10 Hours for Climate, not necessarily about climate, so that it's robust and interdisciplinary, relevant to you know, all different subject areas. And so you can take the pledge to teach climate change for 10 hours at www.teach10hoursforclimate.org, and that's with the number 10 and the number 4. So here are some resources that you can find on the pledge. You can find the guide for completing 10 hours of climate justice education in 1 year, and it includes a planning sheet and a resource toolkit, which is really, really helpful. And there you can find resources from the CLEAN network and from Subject to Climate. And there are some New York specific resources, since our project is based out of New York, some United States focused ones, and then some global resources as well. And so this Teach 10 Hours worksheet is designed to help organizers develop a plan for their 10 hours. So you can see here exactly how you go about doing that, and you kind of make a commitment to yourself by planning out the 10 hours. You know, in the beginning of the school year, thinking about, okay, here are some different areas where we can squeeze in those 10 hours to create more meaningful and relevant education for your students. So next, I wanted to just talk about one example of an organization that is supporting the vision of Teach 10 Hours. So the project that I consult with the National Wildlife Federation for is called the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force. And one way that we go about advocating for these 10 hours is through youth. So here's a screenshot from a meeting with state level decision makers, and the students are explaining that they want to learn about climate change in school, and that, you know, they're frustrated that it's only for maximum 1 to 2 hours per year, and it should be much more than that. And so our youth going to these decision makers is a top-down sort of strategy that's coupled by the bottoms-up sort of strategy of Teach for 10 Hours, which encourages and enlists educators to sign the pledge. And so we're really trying to attack this from many different ways. And these are, by the way, high school students, and they're extremely empowered. Every year we have a great cohort of students who really develop their public speaking skills by speaking to decision makers. And lastly, this is a vision that the Climate Resilience Education Task Force has. It's New York focused, but it can be applicable to any state or country. These are some steps that we think need to happen in order for a complex vision of climate education and a true transformation of the education system. So teaching 10 hours about climate throughout the year certainly can be emphasized in Earth Month, but also definitely throughout the year so that students can understand how systems work. Here are the different steps that we envision. And you can sign on to the platform at cretf.org/platform, and I'll send those links in the chat. But thank you. I'll hand it over again to David and Eban.
All right, thank you very much, Elissa. And so this is a great opportunity for people to step up and do more than 30 minutes. And I think many of you will do that. So now I want to turn to our longtime partner on this project, the Earth Day organization. Bryce Coon is a new member of the staff of our longtime partner. Bryce is the Director of Educational Initiatives at the Earth Day organization. And you can see that the timing of the Climate and Justice Education Week is to start Earth Month, and Bryce will tell you how to sort of bring everything together over the month of April. Go ahead, Bryce.
All right, thank you, David. Thank you to the other presenters and everyone who took the time to join us today to talk about this important topic. So really appreciate everyone's time. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so yeah, like David said, my name is Bryce Coon. I'm the Director of Education with earthday.org. And before that, actually, just like Dan, I taught social studies for 11 years. And, you know, sometimes people wonder kind of what brought me from the classroom to climate education. And there's a few things. I found that students were talking about climate more than teachers were. So when it came to, you know, bringing up issues of climate or doing things in schools like recycling campaigns or composting, that tended to be student-led, not teacher-led or administration-led. And I also noticed, like Elissa was saying, very little time dedicated to this topic. We hear 2 hours a year on average, and that's just not enough. And then lastly, something that was talked about earlier is climate depression and anxiety, or even called it climate despair. And that is something that really hits home for me, because when I would talk about climate with my students, I really got that sense of the climate despair. And so it's not only just not productive for solving the climate crisis, but it's something that we need to be, concerned about for the mental health of young people today. So I love that idea, even of, climate despair to climate repair. So Earth Day has been involved in climate education since the very first Earth Day in 1970. The idea was to have teach-ins about the environment. And I think now when people think of Earth Day, they probably think more of recycling or cleanup events. But one of our main pillars is climate education, because we think that that is such an important part of solving this crisis. It's the analogy that we're in a boat that has a leak and it's filling with water, and the recycling and the cleanups are kind of like dumping water overboard. But we need to be thinking about how we're going to plug that hole and truly solve this crisis. So we believe that we need to be teaching climate education so that young people understand this problem to solve it. You can't really solve a problem without understanding it. And I think that sometimes there's a mistake with the urgency of this issue, that we are not thinking of young people. We're thinking we need to solve this crisis now. True, understand, agree. But we need to be including young people in that. We need to be thinking about the 5 and 10 and 15-year-olds who in a decade or two will start to be leaders, and we'll need them to be leaders. At Earth Day, we also think that climate education is critical for developing and thriving in the green economy. So we already have a growing green economy, and not just in terms of solar installation or wind turbines, but as was mentioned earlier, all jobs could be green jobs and have that component. So we want to make sure that education is being taught everywhere, domestically, internationally, and that all people, marginalized communities, countries, have the ability, to really thrive in the green economy and are not left behind from this environmental economic revolution that's happening. We also at Earth Day are talking about green muscle memory. So and we define green muscle memory as behaviors that move us towards net zero that happen with little or no conscious effort. So like riding a bike. And we know that individuals are not responsible for causing the climate crisis, and these individual actions alone, we know that large corporations are responsible for the vast majority of emissions. But these changes do add up over time collectively. And as Eban was saying earlier, these young people will eventually be architects, and their green muscle memory will push them to design greener buildings. Or they'll be city planners, and they will make their cities more bike friendly. And pretty much every career can push towards a more green economy and environment. So what are we doing about that in Earth Day? At Earth Day, we have 2 pillars. We are also working on the curriculum side, and then we have the policy side. We just recently released this climate literate lesson guide, and this could be applicable to someone who is looking to make climate a class or to teach 10 hours of climate. The idea is that you could take a lesson that you were already planning on teaching and make it a climate literate lesson. So to give you an example, when I taught high school social studies, I taught US government, and teachers are always saying they don't have time, they have all the standards they need to teach. Well, if one of my standards was to teach how a bill becomes a law, there's no reason why I couldn't focus on a group of people who were negatively impacted by something in their environment and mobilize together to push for legislation. And so by looking at some of these guiding questions, teachers can consider the climate crisis, issues of climate justice and equity, and bring them to their students. So it's not adding to the teacher's workload as much as it's just kind of shifting that focus or adding this component. And if you are a teacher or work with teachers, you've probably worked with guides like this before, so it's something that teachers are familiar with and could bring climate education into classes today. At Earth Day, our longer term strategy is looking at policy. So internationally, we are getting countries to include climate education in their NDCs, which are their nationally determined contributions from the Paris Climate Agreement. Essentially, if countries agree to do their NDCs, then they receive funding for their NDCs. So that's one approach. In states like the United States or Canada or Germany, we have federal systems. So having one government say you need to teach climate education is not going to be as effective. So we need to look at states that are doing great work with climate education, New Jersey, Washington, others. We need to highlight their work and then also push other states to do more. We have petitions on our website if you'd be interested in signing them as an individual or as an organization, calling on governments to mandate climate education. And we are preparing one before the COP conference in Dubai. And lastly, we think that businesses are going to play a large role in creating climate education. If you think about other revolutions that have happened in school, if you think about technology education, it's led by businesses saying we want a computer literate workforce. Well, now we have corporations, and UPS and Microsoft have joined us in this call to say we want a climate literate workforce. And so we want businesses, and we're calling on more businesses to join us in that call. And I think David mentioned this earlier, but one of the projects that we are very excited about is working with our partners Subject to Climate and Worldwide Climate Justice Education Week, Bard College, to create our Earth Month calendar. And the idea of this calendar that will be released in April is to move students from education to action. So to make things easy for teachers, we are going to have a calendar. So by week, by day, they can find lessons and activities to engage with their students, to learn about the climate crisis, and then towards the end of the month, find ways to take action in their communities. So if you are an educator or connected to educators, we would very much appreciate if you could share the Earth Month calendar with them. I think would be really great for the educators and of course their students. So looking forward to any questions people may have, and encourage you to check out our website, check out our materials, and consider signing our petitions to call for mandatory climate education. So thank you all again.
All right. Well, thank you, Bryce. And thank for everybody who spoke. So I think at this point, why don't we open up the floor for questions and responses or comments. Some of you have made comments in the chat, and we encourage you to keep doing that. If you have a question, you could raise your hand and we will unmute you. Raise your virtual hand so we can see you, and or to put the question in the chat and then we can repeat it. So are there any initial questions that anybody wants to ask of any of the presenters, or just more generically about the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week?
While we're waiting for questions, let me just add that it's really exciting to see all these resources coming together. It's sort of a mark of a maturing movement. When we started the teach-in 3 years ago, Subject to Climate didn't exist. It's a fabulous sort of content provider and organizing tool. So we're really happy to see that emerging. And we sort of complement what they offer in terms of thoughts about kind of higher ed engagement on our website. And so in addition to sort of, making climate a class, we really emphasize on our website ways to, engage. How do you tap into that energy of 30 or 40 or 60 faculty on your campus who care about climate and want to participate? How do you get them organized so that you can have a big event on your campus and get them talking to hundreds of students about climate as part of this initiative? So do we have questions? Oh, Seth Theory asks updates on a partnership with Climate Fresque, which is a game. David, do you want to respond to that? Or Tobias?
Tobias, maybe you want to respond since you've been working directly with them on that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tobias Hess. I work with this program. Great to be with all of you. Climate Fresque, many of you might be familiar with. It's a kind of decentralized learning platform game where you kind of really learn bottom up about the climate crisis. We encourage you to learn more about Climate Fresque and consider using it during your Worldwide Climate Justice Education Week. We've been in touch with some folks from there and are going to roll out further resources, but I'll put the link into the chat because it's a great resource, and I think encourage you to explore it right now in the meantime.
A lot of other good games that we reference on our website, including the energetic game, decarbonizing New York City. So there's David, are we working with the game show folks again this year? You're muted, David.
Sorry. Yes. There isn't a physical game that called Beat That Heat, which is kind of a combination between the Gong Show and climate education. It's a little bit offbeat in terms of Beat That Heat, but I participated in it last year, and we are working with them, and there will be information about that, or you can look in the report for 2023 and get the information, or you can actually go to my blog post that describes the game and my participation. But yeah, we're very big on creative approaches, using games, using arts and other approaches to get to people who help them to learn in a creative way. Not that every way isn't creative, but a non-traditional way, let's say that.
On the theater side, we have actually, last year we did a climate playwriting contest, and we have three terrific 5-minute plays. So you could, engage someone from your drama department, your theater group to produce those very short plays, which are really good for follow-on discussion. So again, many different approaches to reaching out to unusual suspects, getting more people engaged around the climate event piece, as well as the Make Climate a Class piece. We're running out of the hour here. Any other questions or ideas?
And I think just to close things off, Tobias, why don't you show the video that was created by our social media interns a couple years ago. We have several of our former social media interns with us today, and we're delighted that you are continuing to work with us. And I think this is a nice way to end on this discussion of sort of turning despair to hope.
It can take air out of my little brother's lungs.
What if it submerges my Bangladeshi land of love, magic, stories, and songs?
I'm afraid my hands can do nothing to stop the downpour.
I'm afraid it will leave us alone in a world of concrete and plastic.
Groom Gaia into a vacant void.
It will take the green and leave us in the dark.
I'm afraid it will bring out the worst in people.
Uprooting our families and communities.
Leaving our children to an irreversible nightmare.
Taking the beauty of each season from us.
Causing untold suffering that could have been prevented.
I am afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid. What are we being taught?
What are they teaching us?
Economics, literature, math, engineering, history, music.
What meaning do they hold if our climate swallows us whole?
I can be courageous.
I can be courageous.
I can use my voice and passion, keep fighting even on the days it feels hopeless.
I can fight for my people.
I can hold on to the beauty we still have.
I can save our land against this man-made havoc.
I can be a voice for the sky, the soil, and the sea.
I can make a good future for our next generation.
I can stand up, even when it feels easier to sit down.
I can love my brothers and sisters and protect their lives, because we have the same mother, the great Mother Earth.
I can be louder than polluters that try to silence life.
I can do my part and lead others around me to do better.
I can ask my teacher to make climate.
I can ask my teacher to make climate a class.
I can ask my teacher to make climate a class.
Make climate a class.
Well, thank you everybody for being with us. And again, our ask obviously is to get involved, but more than that, involve the people you know. We all know many climate concerned people. Everybody knows a teacher. Everybody knows a student. So they need to come to our Wednesday morning session. So we're doing it Wednesday at 8 and Wednesday is at noon. So starting next week and then bi-weekly, again, you'll get a follow-up email with details. We're all eager to have one-on-one conversations, set aside some time so we can help you brainstorm how to build a team, how to drive this project forward in your own communities.
Right, and we will share the recording. And Brendan, could you save the chat, please? And then we will, a few of us will remain online for a few minutes if any of you have specific questions or issues that you want to ask or to share. But thank you all for being with us, and let's be courageous together and make climate a movement. Thank you very much.